What's a rich people thing that rich people don't know is a rich people thing? Story 1. Spontaneity. They can randomly decide to do things without much planning, knowing that money will not be an issue. This applies from random fancy dinners to major trips out of the country. Story 2. I dated a guy whose folks were really rich. At one point, we were all riding around on his dad's speedboat on the lake where they had their million-something second home. We passed a big house that was somewhat bigger than the big house his dad and stepmom owned. His stepmom sighed softly and said, "I wonder how the other half lives. It must be nice." Story 3. If you grow up rich, it's pretty much everything. Essentially, it's atmosphere. My aunt's family was very well off. Her husband had a blue-collar background. The first time he saw her was the summer after his junior year of college, when he was part of a crew doing lawn work at her parents' house. They dated very briefly, but they had nothing in common. He busted his ass, got a few lucky breaks, and ended up with a very, very lucrative job. A few solid investments later, he was actually worth more than my aunt's whole family. 8 years after they first met, he asked her out again. To hear him tell it, he took her to a really swanky restaurant with a long wait list, which he managed to bypass thanks to a friend who knew the owner. As soon as they sat down, he said to her, "I always wanted to take you to a place like this." My aunt looked around the room. She looked at him and she said, "A place like what?" Story 4. Parents who know how to do things, who helps you fill out college applications, who guides you into lessons, the right classes, how to rent an apartment, invest, etc., etc. Upper middle class kids have no idea how many things working class kids have to figure out for themselves because their parents have no experience in that stuff. Like the parents don't even know what it is that they don't know. Story 5. I have one that nobody ever thinks about, but friendships. When you move in wealthy circles, maintaining a circle of friendships is much easier. They have the time, energy, and money to prioritize trips away together. They can meet their girlfriends for dinners because they have access to childcare and don't have to be up at 5 a.m. 5 to 7 days a week. They can outsource their admin. They don't have to be calling the electrician or spending the day taking their car to a mechanic. They have access to a high level of medical care, so may spend less time chasing medical issues around. They have the freedom to pursue these friendships. When you're working class, you and all your friends are working their ass off just surviving and keeping on top of their responsibilities. We're all busy and exhausted, so maintaining friendships takes a lot of work and sacrifice. It's why we always see wealthy people with like 40 close friends and we have like 2 close friends we struggle to make time to see. Story 6. A friend of mine is a trust fund baby. She decided she wanted to hike the AT, so she quit her very comfy job, bought all the gear, and flew to Virginia. She only made it a few weeks and got bored. Came back home and her dad found her another very comfy job. I haven't been hiking since. I was floored by this. Another friend decided she wanted to be a dairy farmer, so she bought a farm in Kansas and got some cows. Then she had to hire a farmhand after 2 cows died because she didn't know they needed minerals. They just act so flippantly without care or thought. Story 7. Buying things that last. Rich people can afford much higher quality products. Think furniture, clothing, accessories. Hell, I'm sitting on a probably 30-year-old couch that we inherited from my in-laws, who I would describe as on the high end of middle class. But this stuff also gets spread around. When you move into your own place, your dad's old friend might have a dresser for you, or an old TV that still works, or what have you. And over time, the smart rich people spend less money than the poor. They can afford the upfront investment in higher quality products that last, while also enjoying the better quality of the products over their lifespan. And yes, for those in the know, I am reframing the Samuel Vimes boots theory. But it works here! Story 8. Vacations. I grew up in a family that was very financially comfortable. I was used to going on multiple trips a year, including a handful of international trips before I even graduated from high school. I lived a somewhat sheltered life surrounded mostly by friends of families in similar positions, so I thought it was normal. I remember trips to country club resorts, all-inclusives, multiple trips to Disney World, 2 trips to Mexico for high school graduations. We were constantly traveling throughout the year. Now I'm an adult who makes a very average salary, and I never feel like traveling because my money is either tied up in something else or I feel the need to save just in case. My family went on a trip to Colorado this past spring, and it was so expensive. We had to buy appropriate winter wear because my husband and I didn't own any, including good snow boots, coats, and pants. Airfare. Food. We couldn't afford to ski because a single day pass was $200, excluding what it would cost to rent equipment. We walked around a cute little downtown hoping to find a nice memento to memorialize the trip, and ended up only getting a single magnet for our fridge. Sometimes I get a little bummed that I've probably already gone on some of the coolest trips of my life as an early 30-something, but that's okay. Traveling is a privilege. And when we have the resources to do it again, it will feel more special because it will be special. Story 9. Getting custom builds for things that require an expert in the field. Getting a custom chair made by a chairbler, or getting a custom guitar made by a luthier. It reminds me a bit of Stevenson's The Diamond Age, where only rich people could afford to have rustic craftsmen hand-make them things while everyone else gets mass-manufactured factory goods. Story 10. You want the honest truth? Speaking from someone who works daily with clients who have more money than they'll ever be able to spend in a lifetime. Everything. Literally, everything they deal with they don't realize us normal folk cannot afford. A recent client wanted me to hop on a plane and fly down to talk about a project. Just, hey, can you fly down this afternoon? I need to go over these design decisions. No, I cannot. And that's scratching the surface. Going out to dinner with these people ends in me losing a week's pay because they insist on going to the most expensive fucking place possible. I'm not saying we need to stop at McDonald's, but when my 8-ounce piece of steak costs $100 plus, there's a problem. And then, of course, there's the total and complete lack of realization that the world does not revolve around them. What do you mean is ahead of mine? I just approved it for production. Yes, but they approved theirs 2 weeks ago. So just push mine ahead. And of course, the activities. Hey, let's go play golf, tennis, cricket this Friday. Can't, I work. So just take the day off. What's one day? The difference between me eating next week or not. Story 11. Having time. Poor people spend more time on survival stuff. Take traveling. A poorer person may have to rely on public transportation, coach seats in an airplane, buses, or Amtrak. A wealthy person may have a private jet they have access to. A poor person has to go to the grocery store, shop, cook, clean, etc. A wealthy person may have someone who does all that and cooks for them. So rich people have more time to live exactly as they want without worrying about survival kind of stuff. Story 12. Having a gardener and/or housekeeper? Owning a vacation house, chalet, cottage. Man, I wish I could own a house. Always getting your coffee as takeout. Going out to lunch at an actual restaurant every day. Getting a service to come pick up and do your laundry and then drop it off later. And this last one I get from a lot of younger folk who have no concept that their family is well off, and they are reaping the benefits. Always traveling. Usually these are kids in their 20s, but I know a couple who I see Facebook updates constantly where they are always in a different country. These are the people who are gone months at a time, and then maybe come back home during the holidays and just stay with their parents, and then leave again. They don't have a house or apartment of their own that they would need to worry about continuing to pay for, so they can just be a nomad. Story 13. I think it would probably be the amount of free time that gets consumed by just day-to-day tasks. Most of my week is spent at work, doing chores at home, going shopping for groceries, running errands, and then if I'm lucky, I sneak a couple of hours to play video games on the weekend. I don't even have kids. Life is just full of tasks that need to be taken care of. Having someone dedicated to taking care of your finances, another person who does your food shopping and preparation, maybe even a third person to deal with your household chores are all extremely expensive services, but enable you to actually have free time. I'm sure rich people realize the cost of those services, but I imagine many would be surprised to know how much time they actually get back that most of us simply don't get. Story 14. Not questioning the price of things. Like they don't ever wonder if it's worth the price or if they can afford to buy something. They just buy it. Not huge things like cars, but everyday stuff. Oh, we don't have an ice maker? Just bought one. Our vacuum cleaner isn't working right? Immediately buy a new one. I'm doing okay financially now, but still have to pause and think if we can afford to pick up certain items or have to wait a paycheck or two to do so. Some folks have zero concerns with money, and it shows when they also tell you that they have X item and it's so wonderful and you have to buy one. Yeah, I'm not buying that. Story 15. For my purposes, I'm going to define rich as starting in the upper middle class. Your average lawyer is rich by middle-aged by this standard. And as I work with lawyers and have for a while now, they offer some interesting ways to illustrate things. For one, the notion that someone doesn't have savings will, they frequently suppose, be a choice at best, if not an actual moral failing. The notion that a person might literally not have anything to set aside once the non-negotiable costs are tallied does not compute. A rich person, as I've defined them, might not be saving themselves, but they could after all, and they know it. Another is that a rich person probably does not know how much money they have with any degree of precision. They might think they have about X thousand in the investment account, Y 10,000 in the retirement account, some vague thousands in checking, and frequently some equally vague but larger amount in checking. In all of these, there is a significant lack of precision. A poor person, both by virtue of having fewer places where money might be an absolute need, almost certainly knows how much money they have, often down to the penny. A rich person can shop for groceries without really considering the cost of this versus that. The deciding factor on what goes into the cart is almost always something other than money. They prefer that brand of chips, beef presented in this particular way, and won't so much as blink at the fact that many types of produce can vary in price multiple times over depending on seasonal availability. Similarly, they can choose where they want to eat without having to calculate whether it is possible. And from this same wellspring, all forms of spontaneity. The more money you have, the less you need to plan, well, everything. You can take all of this and package it together into a single idea that underlines why no poor person ever believes anyone with money when they say money can't buy happiness. And that is that if you are poor, much of what you have to give to the world as a person is dedicated to planning and managing a resource that is finite and frequently entirely absent. Stated differently, the thing rich people do that they don't know about is that they are not stressed about the basic tasks of living life to the point where they frequently have very little left for anything else. Story 16. Not shopping around, especially for big things like home renos. My in-laws are like this. They are quite well off, and whenever they need something, they just go out and buy it without a second thought. They recently had epoxy poured in their garage by the first company they called spent close to $10K when we had our basement poured by a smaller company for just under $2K. Not to discount there may be advantages to going with a bigger company with a warranty or something, but to not even call around to other companies before dropping thousands shocks me. Story 17. Based on what I've seen all my life, they think everybody always has the option of asking their parents to fix any given problem or eventuality. Need more money due to unforeseen expenses? Need a contact to help on some specific issue? Ask away and you shall receive. I was a broke-ass college student with a scholarship in a really expensive and prestigious private university. And I had a lot of wealthy friends who were really nice and never acted like assholes about their money. But it was pretty common that if I ran into some problem, a lot of them would, in trying to be helpful, suggest I call my parents or ask why I didn't call my parents, not realizing that my lower middle-class parents couldn't always fix things for me, especially if it involved simply throwing money at the problem. My parents always invested as much as they could in our education, so I went to private school all my life and I saw the exact same thing in elementary, middle school, and high school. You want the newest, most awesome backpack? A class trip? Mom and Dad got you covered. For example, I remember lending a Sega Genesis game to a friend in middle school, and when I asked for it back a few weeks later, he told me his mom had thrown his consoles and all the cartridges away. Note, consoles and games in plural. Because his report card had come in and his grades sucked. So he apologized and bought me a new game to pay me back for the one his mom had thrown in the trash, but only after he saw I was really sad about it. Thing is, his initial reaction was thinking it was no big deal, because to him, it was the equivalent of my mom throwing away a comic book that cost less than $1. The thought that I had saved for that game for a long time never even crossed his mind as a possibility until I told him about it. And my mom would have never in a million years thrown away a game that cost $40, even if she thought it was to blame for my bad grades, much less several $100s worth of games and consoles. As we got older, this just turned into networking instead of asking mom and dad for help. But still often involves their parents and their contacts, and or their money. And they're currently turning into the parents that solve everything for their kids, especially by just throwing money at the problem. Story 18. I'm a FedEx driver who delivers to the areas with a lot of money. Every day for the past week, I've been backing my truck up to a house on a steep hill, offloading pieces of furniture for a couple who just moved in. The husband greets me at the door every time I show up. And the other day, this guy said to me, "I think the only thing harder than your job is me putting all this together." I'm sorry you have to twist an Allen wrench while I twist my back. Story 19. Being afforded a second chance. Rich college kid gets caught in a drug bust and goes to rehab, comes out, and everyone deserves a second chance. Poor college kids get caught with the exact same amount of the same drug, and they spend the rest of their life struggling to find decent employment due to a criminal record. Because they cannot afford to go back to continue their education, whilst also being able to afford both shelter and food. Story 20. One thing to remember, the grass is always greener over the other side. So although it might seem out of touch for someone who is worth $5 million to be jealous of someone with a $20 million house and a $5 million Bugatti, they view themselves as behind those they pay attention to. I saw this with my mom a lot. When I was 18 in 2013, I just started university in Australia and she had broken up with partner and had to move out of the house she was living in. Long story short, she was limited on money, and after paying rent, bills, car, petrol, etc., she was left with about $100 to $150 for food leisure. Now I was working 40 hours a week and studying 40 hours a week to support myself. And my dad, ex-husband from a decade ago, wasn't in a position to help mom or me out either. Now fast forward to 2022, my dad's parents have passed away. He and my auntie left a house in Perth that was bought for $150 down payment in 1960 that they sold for $6 to $8 million and split it. I work in database systems now with a master's and make good money. So now we are both in a position to keep my mom afloat and then some. I got her a nice car, dad pays her rent, etc. But the point I'm getting to is in 2013, when my mom could hardly afford groceries, she would cry to me that people across the road get to go on holiday once every 2 to 3 years and they can afford to have a BBQ with friends and to go out once a week. All reasonable things to want to be able to do in your retirement, in my opinion. But now she has money basically on a faucet from my father and I, and all of a sudden, the problems are, oh, my 14-gram gold chain is only $18K, when Stacy's husband got her a $22K with a diamond. I need that. Or now her Honda Accord that I got for like $70K to $80K in 2020, financed. Now that car is not good enough because it's 4 years old. When in 2013 she was driving an absolute bomb around and happy that it was getting good gas mileage. In saying this, I love my mom and she struggled to bring me up well and give me the best, so I will always be there for her. But we have had to put caps on her spending credit card. But yeah, the point being, no matter how rich, grass is always greener on the other side. Story 21. My mom works front desk at a dental office. She has been there for over 20 years. The owner dentist is a pompous ass who makes money out the wazoo, has 2 vacation homes. He makes sure to mention all the time and still doesn't offer benefits to his employees because it's too expensive. Unfortunately, I have to see him twice a year. I usually try to avoid conversation for the sake of keeping the peace between him and my mom as he is her boss, because I have a hard time being kind to him considering what he says. So, last time I was in, he came in to check my teeth and told me out of nowhere. We weren't even speaking before this, that his daughter and her BF moved to Jamaica and are about to retire. I said, "Isn't your daughter my age, 25? And he said, "Yeah, they put $200,000 down on an investment and made it back over tenfold." Now, what I wanted to say was, do you actually believe that the normal person has $200,000 to potentially throw away? But instead I stared at him. Didn't say a word, not even sure I blinked. I stared at him so long in silence he left without saying a word. My New Year's resolution was to make people sit in the awkwardness they create. Story 22. Believing that they are self-made, and they got there by themselves on merit, and therefore anyone else can do it, but they choose not to. This is not about saying that rich people don't work hard, but the rich and successful people I know are the ones who got the best education, private tutoring, lots of resources that aided their learning, opportunities for first jobs at their parents' business or their family friend's business. They got a loan from the bank of mom and dad or some investment capital from a family member. I have a comfortable life after growing up in poverty with none of these advantages, and I still know I didn't do it on my own. All the government handouts that people deride were the things that meant I didn't starve while I worked to become successful. The pull yourself up by the bootstraps choir assumes that people have bootstraps in the first place. Story 23. Oh, whatever, I'll just get a new one. Mentality really easily with expensive stuff, especially things like subscriptions to streaming services, electronics like game consoles, TV, etc., or even just hiring someone so they don't have to learn do it, because it's just less hassle. I'm not talking like hiring painters, like fun things we might save for super special occasions, if we even thought of it. One time during a huge summer bash at my aunt's house, she ran out to her street real quick and came down her long-ass driveway to the back of her house in a damn ice cream truck. She was waving to us like the queen and hanging out the side of the truck. We were all complaining of the heat, and she saw all of the kids running to their parents for cash after hearing the call of the ice cream truck. Now, in my culture, though not mandatory, it looks kind of shady on you to have people pay for things at something that you're hosting. Also, both sides of my family grew up incredibly poor, and my aunt would do absolutely anything for kids. She never ever wants anyone to feel less than. Everyone should be having a good time and having equal access to everything. While all of us kids swarmed, my aunt asked, "How much do you make in a day?" He said his total, whipped out a checkbook from, and she gave him more than that and said, "Hey, when do you finish? If you just spend the next couple hours here, at like 2, then you can go home early to your family, right?" That was the dopest thing ever. Still legendary until this day. Also, shout out to my rich auntie. She's also incredibly caring and supportive. Was going for some really hard stuff at home, and I had called her to talk to her. Had to pay off my tuition and had no resources to do so. Despite how much I tried my best, I cried to my aunt that $2,000 was standing between me and getting my degree. That lady took all the information she needed straight to the bank and paid for it and said, "Sweetie, you're graduating." Story 24. went to a wealthy neighborhood in Silver Spring, MD, to attend a veterans dinner held by a rich guy who really cared about service members. The first thing I noticed, and the main thing I still remember, is his kids having a huge professional trampoline the size of a gym pool, as well as 6 other trampolines dug level into the ground. It was obviously an expensive accessory just for the kids to have fun with. He was a very nice guy, and his kids weren't at all snobby or arrogant. You could tell the guy came from a very humble background. Still, that backyard of his was outrageously outrageous. I want to be rich just so I can do fun projects at home.